What's up, everybody? Andrew Mahone here from Darium's Competitive Pokemon, back with another old school deck profile today. This is another base set deck profile, and I'm really excited about this one. This is Jason Klaczynski's own original creation. There was a kind of the conception that Haymaker was just the only deck in base set format. Base set, only the first 102 Pokemon cards ever released. You know, those first 102 cards, those are the only ones that you could use in base set format, and of those 102 cards, really just Electabuzz and Hitmonchan are the two best ones. With all the energy removal and hazing cards, it's just really difficult to get any other sort of strategy up and rolling, especially one that involves evolution Pokemon. I mean, look at these basics: 30 hit points, 30 hit points. Really, Hitmonchan and Electabuzz kind of laugh in the face of those wimpy little Abra and Magikarp. However, this deck really does have the stuff to compete with that original Haymaker deck. It's actually a really cool deck to play and a great idea on Jason's part to be able to wear out most of those old Haymaker lists. This deck really just outlasts, outsurvives, and the amount of energy it has outlasts all those energy removals that the Haymaker deck will throw at it. And at the end of the day, you could sweep up with Gyarados and just Dragon Rage for a very satisfying win. So excited to show off this base set creation for you all and just see, you know, this deck is a deck that competes with that original Haymaker deck much, and also competes with Buzzapdos. So this is a pretty cool deck to have in the mix as well. So let's go ahead and get started. We have 3 base set Gyarados to start things off. This thing has a huge 100 hit points, so very cool. Just a huge attacker that we get to swing with in this deck, and 4 lowly Magikarp with their 30 hit points. We also have 3 copies of Damage Swap Alakazam, 3 copies of Kadabra, and 4 copies of Abra. Then we have 4 copies of Chauncey. So you can see here, the deck is pretty simple, and really the logic behind the deck actually makes a lot of sense. Our main attacker is Gyarados. So you're going to be setting up these Gyarados, but really on the bench, just kind of while you get rolling. Usually you want to start with a Chauncey who's got an absurd 120 hit points. Your Magikarps and Abras should sit safely on the bench, or safely as they can with Gust of Wind in format. However, they'll sit back on the bench and kind of build up as you just have Chaunceys out in the active position, scrunching, maybe double edging if they ever can, things like that. But really just kind of stalling and wasting your opponent's energy removal. You build up Gyarados, and eventually you'll be able to Dragon Rage. Now, I know you're saying, Andrew, with super energy removal, how in the world are you ever going to pull off a Dragon Rage? Well, they only have so many super energy removals. They only have so many energy removals. By the end of the game, they're going to get worn out of resources with all of the healing that you do and all the work that you make them go through to knock out a huge Chauncey and a huge Gyarados. Not to mention Gyarados resists fighting, so it resists Hitmonchan. Your opponent's Hitmonchans are going to be useless. They're going to have to use Electabuzz for the most part to take this deck down. Gyarados has a nice grass weakness, not a lightning weakness, so Gyarados is a formidable wall. Eventually you will be able to build up Dragon Rage and sweep your whole team, but until we get that built up, we're going to be doing a lot of stalling. So Chauncey is your ideal starter. That's why we play 4, because you don't want to start Abra and you don't want to start Magikarp. So you can't really afford to start either of those. Instead, you want this fat little egg carrier Pokemon thing to sit out there in the active position and take your hits. Scrunch is a cool stalling technique you can use. Flip a coin if heads, prevent all damage done to Chauncey during your opponent's next turn. So really cool little stall technique that you have for just 2 energy. Also, it's only got a retreat of 1, so pretty cool there. You know, the resistance doesn't really make a difference, but the weakness of fighting, not great. But 120 hit point basic, you can't beat it in base set format, and this is as good of a wall as it gets. This is basically Wailord of the base set format. I mean, look, your evolution Pokemon don't have nearly this many hit points. Chauncey, for all intents and purposes, is your Wailord of base set format. So you're going to be stalling with this thing while you set up these guys, and then while you have Chauncey in the active position, you set up a Alakazam on your bench, which the opponent probably will not be able to knock out in one hit. Once you can get your Abra evolved up into a Kadabra is much more difficult to knock out. And then Alakazam really probably is not getting knocked out in one hit in base set format. 80 hit points is enough to withstand most attacks. So then, once you set up Alakazam, you start using Damage Swap to heal your Chauncey's off, move the damage to your benched Pokemon, and then you'll heal it all away with Pokemon Center, which I will show off in the trainer section. So you're going to be healing your Pokemon, wasting all of your opponent's energy removals. And then once you get those energy removals wasted and depleted, then you can go up with Gyarados and just Dragon Rage once your opponent's, items have, not items, but trainers have been depleted. So that's it for the Pokemon. Let's take a look at those trainer cards. Now, Jason in his list plays 3 copies of Professor Oak, 3 copies of Computer Search, 4 copies of Item Finder, 2 copies of Pokemon Trader, 1 Pokemon Breeder, 3 copies of Switch, 2 Pokemon Center, 4 Energy Retrieval, and 1 Last. So that's it for the trainers. You can see that Jason only opts for 3 copies of Oak and 3 copies of Computer Search, which I actually like because this deck doesn't really need to burn resources early. You're not trying to go for a quick win here. You're trying to go for the long haul. So you want to make this game last as long as possible. So you're not really going to be burning with Oak unless you have to. You're not really going to be burning for things with Computer Search. What you want is Item Finder. You want to get things back. You want to get your energy retrievals back to be able to get more energy into play so that your opponent cannot possibly remove all of the energy that you have access to. This thing plays an astounding 18 water energy and 4 double colorless energy. That is more than a third of the deck is energy cards. Can you believe that? A third of the deck is energy cards. Then we also play 4 energy retrieval and 4 item finder. There is just no way that any Haymaker deck will be able to remove all of this energy that you have access to. Eventually, their energy retrieval cards will, or their energy removal cards will get depleted. With all of this retrieval that you have at your disposal, eventually they will run out of energy removal options, and you could sweep them with that Dragon Rage, as I said before. So, very cool. We do have Computer Search here, which can help you get your Pokemon Breeder to set up Alakazam quickly if you need to, or Computer Search, just nice to be able to go grab your Gyarados too, to get those lowly Magikarps beefed up so that they can actually withstand hits. You know, Magikarps go down very easily if your opponent's just gusting them up, if you cannot evolve them quickly. So Pokemon Breeder is nice to be able to evolve up into that Alakazam if you do happen to find your one-of, but you don't really need it. We do have copies of Pokemon Trader here. We do play a lot of Pokemon, so Pokemon Trader is a good option just to be able to swap, one Pokemon in your hand in for another Pokemon out of the deck, much like Pokemon Communication, more or less the same card. So nice little consistency boost here, and we don't necessarily have to use Computer Search and discard 2 cards from our hand, which are probably going to be valuable cards. We don't really necessarily want to discard 2 cards in order to go search out a Pokemon, so Pokemon Trader is very useful. We also have 3 copies of Switch in here. You saw that both Gyarados and Alakazam have a fat retreat cost of 3. That is huge. So you're going to want to have the option to switch if one of them gets stranded out in the active position, especially your Alakazam, because your opponent can gust up the Alakazam and then hit into it with Electabuzz just over and over again, and that could be very annoying. So you're going to want to have switch, because if they're able to take out the Alakazam, then the whole deck kind of falls apart. So you need to have access to switch to get that Alakazam out of the active position if your opponent tries to strand it up. Pokemon Center is Pokemon Center is what makes this deck really, really good. I mean, Pokemon Center allows you to remove all damage counters from your Pokemon with damage counters on them, and then you discard all the energy. So it's kind of like a mass potion. It's just max potion to everybody with damage counters on them. Discard the energy attached to them. Pokemon Center is really good, especially with Alakazam, because you move the damage where you want it, then you Pokemon Center, and all the damage goes away. So you can move it off your Pokemon with the energy on it. That's the crucial part of this deck. The Gyarados will finally get 3 energy to stick on it. Then your opponent will hit into it. You move the energy off of, or you move the damage counters off of it, and then continue to hit with the same Gyarados over and over again. So you only need to build up 1 Gyarados that ends up surviving all of your opponent's attacks. And then so long as you got Chaunceys on the bench, you could just keep moving damage to the Chaunceys, then eventually heal it off with Pokemon Center. And now since we do play 4 copies of Chauncey, then you really only need 2 copies of Pokemon Center. You don't need a lot. You can go grab one with computer search, then you can just item finder it back over and over again. And that's more or less how the strategy goes. Of course, we do play 1 copy of Last just because this card is too insanely good not to play. If you want to ensure that you won't be removaled for a couple turns, or if you want to just, give your deck a little bit more lasting power, maybe you're getting close to decking out and you need to make sure that you don't deck out, Last gets all your trainer cards from your hand back into the deck. So it's a nice option to have, not only for disrupting your opponent, but also for making sure that you don't deck out yourself. So that does it for the trainer cards. Moving on to the energy. Like I said before, this deck plays an absurd amount of energy. We've got 18 water energy. That is a lot of water. 18 water energy and 4 copies of double colorless. The whole point of this deck is to run your opponent out of those energy removals and sweep with your boy Gyarados. Gyarados, as Darium would say. So very cool deck. Shout out to Jason Klasinski for coming up with it. You could check out his kind of writings and testing experience with these old decks in the description below. I'm going to put the link to his blog. If you haven't checked that out already, I highly recommend it. And old formats are really in right now. I don't know, I've just from talking with my friends and kind of the community at large, it seems to me like a lot of people are getting into these retro decks just to talk about it a little bit. And that's really exciting to me. I mean, as a collector and a player myself, building and cataloging, the history of the Pokemon trading card game is just very valuable because you figure, Pokemon's been around for 20 years. In 20 more years, if we don't catalog the history of this game and put together the decks that were good, then, that history just might be gone, So it's kind of our responsibility of a community, as a community, to kind of come together and catalog and figure out, what was good during what times. And just having this collection on hand, to me, is just totally invaluable. I mean, right now, the cards are 20 years old. They're only going to get harder to get as time goes on. And in fact, the cost of some of these cards, especially in like the early 2000s formats, the cost of some of those cards has really spiked in the last year and a half that I've been collecting old decks myself. So if you're thinking about getting into old decks, either as a collector or as a player or just a casual enthusiast, these are some of my favorite decks to play just for fun. I feel like it's just so lighthearted and nice, and you build the deck, and then once you build the deck, it just stays, you know what I mean? Like you have that piece of history, you have that piece of time. It stays the same. You don't have to worry about updating it. You don't have to worry about, is it meta legal or is it standard or whatever. You have like this deck from that format, and it's going to be just as cool in 10 years as it is now. So I think that to me is really cool and really gets me excited. So if you are interested in old decks at all and want to talk to me about it, Twitter's a great place to do that. So go ahead and check me out on Twitter at enjoyfriend, ENJOY friend. If you just want to show off some old cards, old collections that you have, go ahead and tweet at me. I love seeing that stuff. So go ahead, check me out, follow me, whatever, what have you, if you feel like it. But anyways, thank you all for checking out the video. Let me know what you think of this Gyarados Alakazam deck in the comments below. Thank you all for watching. Peace.